Okay, wait, do it again?
No, you're good.
Is mine on?
No, you're on.
I'd like to call the St. John Park Board meeting to order. Could we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Tyler, if we could have roll call, please.
John Boersma,
Here.
Pat Connolly,
Here.
Mike Moffett,
Here.
Mike Bovat,
Here.
Tyler McLeod present, Wayne Pondinas,
Present.
Nicole Bennett,
Present.
Chris Salatis.
Present.
Item 4 on the agenda, approval of minutes for Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. Consideration for approval of the minutes.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes as posted.
I will second that motion.
That's a motion by Mike Moffett, second by Pat Connolly. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 5, new business. A, we have a review of the draft of park rules. Mr. Tyler?
Yeah, so in your packets, we have a draft of the parks section of the town code. If you recall, we briefly discussed this in November of last year, and then it came up again in January, but it was one of those projects we kind of put on the back burner as we've been kind of working. Nicole and I have been working kind of all year on it, off and on, to get this updated. The current park section is very limited. It hasn't been updated in quite some time, actually. So what this is, it's, we cleaned up the current park section of the town code, cross-reference other areas of the code to incorporate park-related items into this section. And then we added some park rules, which currently we do not have in our parks. So those start on page 11, just to let you guys know, so you don't have to search too hard for them. I think the approach was to establish kind of some basic rules that are common for most towns, whether it be hours, rules for fishing, rules for camping, rules for fireworks, alcohol, kind of basic park rules that you see in a standard typical park system. So I should say that the rules don't necessarily apply, though, to if it's a park, a town, or another approved event. Whether we have baseball, for example, right now it's written in there, park hours are dawn to dusk. Baseball, of course, goes pretty late at times. If there's another program or event we have going on, the hours wouldn't necessarily apply to that. Then the same with fireworks, obviously, with 4th of July. What else would be Christmas in the park? If there's another event that comes up, obviously, these park rules don't apply to those specific events. Alcohol as well. Right now we don't have a permit process for alcohol for events. That's something I think that we can work towards, because we've had requests from local breweries to maybe set up some of our concerts or maybe other town special events. So that's something we can work to set up. But a rule, for example, alcohol is prohibited in the parks wouldn't necessarily apply in that situation. So these are just general park usage. I think that's an important distinction to make. If you guys remember, we've had rules that have been published in the past. We've had rules on our website. We've put out rules in a recreation guide, but they were not established by town ordinance. So that's what this process would do.
But these are kind of up to date now?
Yes, yeah. So yeah, Nicole, do you?
Yeah, if I can. Johnny, to answer your question, no, this is a draft for your review. Nothing has been passed. It has to be codified, or it has to be passed in ordinance form by the council. So the idea would be is that with input from each of you as well as from the police chief, and obviously members of the council. But even before that, I guess, from this board to make a recommendation to the council to pass and actually codify, ordinances to that effect. As Tyler said, what you have now, and that's what I had emailed you as well, so that you could see the very limited draft of what is currently contained in your code, and quite frankly, the amount of things in that code that are just in conflict with state law. Likewise, there's a significant portion of the code, of the Indiana code, that has not been adopted by the town. So absent adopting those particular sections to apply to this park board, the powers and authorities don't apply. So that was a lot of what we had incorporated into the entire first article that just lays out the Parks and Recreation, restates what is currently the funding mechanism for the park board, where your money is coming from, and puts out the powers and authorities that you have. One of the things that is specifically laid out in here is that you can establish rules or guidelines, but that absent passage of an ordinance by the council, by state law, they don't have any force. So it kind of adopts that and applies it to the town, so that then in fact you can pass rules that are actually enforceable. The actual, what's laid out in Article 3, starting on page 7, that are the conduct in the parks, there's an extensive amount of definitions, and quite frankly, many people kind of forget, I think, when reviewing ordinances or state statutes, that at the end of the day, it's the definitions that rule. Something as simple as the definition of a motor vehicle in the Indiana code has a different meaning as it's applied to each section. So words don't always just have, your common meaning in that sense. And that's where those definitions really do turn on things, and where something as simple as what's defined as a bike path can, change versus, let's say, the bike lane in the roadway, things of that nature that people might use interchangeably, but that can have very different definitions. So a lot of those turn on, or a lot of the meanings of these rules turn on what those definitions are. But the only thing I would clarify as to what Tyler had said is the rules still apply. They apply across the board to everything, to everyone in that sense. They're not accepted out, or it's not only in certain situations. What I did through this was set out the areas in which the sections don't apply. In many of them, for example, the fireworks is always a good one, because that's always a very controversial subject for a lot of people, is accepting out from there where am I at? Page 14 in the draft that I gave you. That the section under 1591C, that the section does not apply to the town of St. John, an authorized sponsor of a permitted special event, or any department authorized individual, only when acting in strict compliance with state law and with the terms of a valid town-issued permit or contract. So clearly, whoever's coming in and doing your fireworks has a town permit. So they're accepted out by those rules specifically, so that you're not putting it in the hands of your law enforcement to have to determine, who this applies to or who doesn't. If they have a permit, okay, you're good. If it's a town employee working in capacity as part of a town project, part of a town event, whatever. But those types of things are, where it allows for those exceptions if the town ever issues a permit. Keep in mind with any of these, what I did is I went off from what Tyler had given me in proposed rules and applied them as to where the town either does not have a rule currently, or there's not a state law that applies. So you can't duplicate in an ordinance what is already state law. It's a violation of home rule. And there's no enforceability on that kind of an ordinance. So if, for example, damage in park property, To ticket somebody for something that would be a misdemeanor as criminal mischief, you can't do. You can't just make it a lesser penalty, for the same type of activity. So littering, for example, is another one. There's a state statute on littering. So those things are covered. It's not where they're not in the town code or they're not protected. The town park areas or rec areas aren't protected. It's just that it doesn't have to be by ordinance. The other thing I would point out is that, as always happens, in cross-referencing these leads to other ordinances. And if it's already something that applies in the town, then we don't need to incorporate it into the park section of the ordinance because the town ordinances apply across the board. For example, there's a very convoluted and problematic smoking ordinance in the town that allows for smoking in town hall, which is completely in violation of state statute. I know you're going to set up the...
Isn't it true we still have that horse rule?
You do.
What was it again? It's like really crazy.
Yeah, about the parking of horses or yielding to, like in front of or in front of, hitching them in front of businesses and
Well, you
yielding
can never be
vehicles
too
to-
safe.
You never know, right? You never know. Yes, yes.
Be easier.
Yeah, it's kind of comical. But so that's really, a lot of it. And what I guess from the discussion that Tyler and I have had, what we're essentially looking for from you is, in considering what you see as either good things or bad things, problems that you want to prevent, things that you want enforced in the parks. And in reviewing what is put out here in draft form, if, for example, you've got language here about hunting and feeding of wildlife, that no person shall hunt wildlife, no person shall feed wildlife. If you don't care about feeding wildlife in the parks, then fine. It's, we delete that. If you want the squirrels in the town to be hunted throughout the parks, we can, modify that as well, whatever it may be. It's not something that's set, one way or the other. It starts with all of you. And once we can get that to rules that are applicable, then that's what would be, moving forward to make the recommendation to the council. So until that happens and until this kind of gets the stamp of approval from all of you, that would kind of be the next step. A couple of things that I kind of want to bring to your attention. One I mentioned was fireworks. By law, and I should have given you Article 98, state statute requires that or prohibits any municipality from prohibiting the hours or prohibiting fireworks entirely and prohibiting hours of fireworks in communities. So there's set times and dates of which you cannot limit the fireworks more than what those are. It's around the 4th of July, around New Year's. And the statute says, however, that you can't narrow those times, but those times are allowed for on your own property, on property of another where you have permission, or anywhere that you have a valid permit. So what I drafted here in this sense, just because this is, as Tyler had pointed out, kind of tends to be the general consensus that you don't want people, most communities don't want people shooting off fireworks on their own in parks. So you can prohibit the location, we just can't modify those times in the town to say somebody can't do it on their own property. So for example, what's drafted here is more restrictive in saying that no fireworks shall be, used, ignited, or discharged at any time in a park or recreational area. If that's not, and I bring that up just because it's the one place that when towns do want to narrow on fireworks, it's where it can be done. But if that's not something you want to do, by all means, those are the kinds of things where I'm saying it's just kind of pulling out what were kind of some of the common concerns of municipalities in Lake County. That doesn't mean, though, that has to be something, that's
Yeah, like I could
prohibited
see
or
it
allowed
being
here.
changed to, discharge fireworks at any time in the park or recreational areas other than events with permits.
Well, that's where, you got to remember, what is not prohibited is permitted. That's kind of the golden rule too, of anything under the law. Unless there's a law that says you can't do it, you can. So laying this out here is sending out that it shall be a violation to do that at any time. And then the exception in subpart C, that it doesn't apply to the town, someone with a permit, someone with authorized, authority, all of that.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it's putting it out there as that it is prohibited completely, and then you put the exceptions in.
Gotcha.
So that those things are kind of set up that way. Same thing as Tyler had mentioned, like with alcohol, that it's prohibited unless there was, now obviously you don't have venues at the present moment that you're renting out to people and allowing alcohol, but as Tyler said, you want to bring a pints in the park in, you want to bring in, a wine tasting or a beer, whatever. It allows, then it's a park issued or it's a town issued permit that allows for those things, so that it always puts the ball back in the town's court to say yay or nay. Well, actually, it's nay, and then, but for the permit, then, they get the permission. But I just think that a lot of this just has to really just become, what do you want your rules to be? And they can be more or less restrictive, more or less rules. What I'd ask you to think about, like I said, are the things that you see as being concerns. If there's this major problem of, people getting hit by ice balls in the parks, then, you make a decision of certain areas where you only want snowball fighting, or, you don't want skateboards anywhere in parks at any time except in the skate park. Alternatively, you're okay with them being on the bike paths or in designated parking lots, things of that nature. Is to kind of read it with that kind of a mindset of what do you want? How do you want this handled in your towns and in your town, in these parks? And it has to, it starts here with all of you.
I had a question going back to the fireworks. You said it can't supersede the state law or whatever. I said something.
Do you make it more?
So if they're allowed like 4th of July weekends and whatever I know there's all kinds of exceptions, would they be able to do it in the parks, or would they wouldn't be able to because we said they can't? Because I like say 4th of July, we know obviously on 4th of July you can shoot from certain till midnight or whatever. Would they be able to do that in the park since that's the law? Or
By statute, you can shoot fireworks off on your property or property of another with permission. So that is what the state statute says. Then on town property, obviously, unless you're giving someone permission, if you leave it silent, then they can shoot off fireworks anywhere. If you do not want them in your parks, and that's how it's
this is basically putting it in writing. We don't want you shooting
that you cannot shoot fireworks off in any park or on park property unless you have a permit, all of that for one of those events. Again, if that's not a concern, if it routinely is, hey, people go out to the bike path behind their house and are lighting off fireworks, and you're okay with that, that's okay.
I was going like baseball and all that. You don't want them shooting fireworks out there because you got events out the basketball courts.
And that's normally the concern with people, is they don't want, now, if everybody's at the park and, you're granting permission that on that night, that, people can be doing sparklers while they're waiting in the park for the fireworks to go off, fine. You can put those permissions out. If alternatively, you wanted it precluded all the time, otherwise, absent the town saying something is okay, that you don't want people just doing that for that concern. And that's normally what happens, is right, it's where people are huddling in large spaces, that's the kind of stuff that people don't want. That's what I'm saying, is that's your prerogative. As it is right now, the statute says that you have to allow it during those hours on individually owned property or property of someone else with permission. But like I said, that's what the state statute is, and then you can make that more restrictive, so then you can say where it can and can't happen. You just can't limit it on people's individual property or on property of somebody else.
Right. Okay.
Now moving forward to this, what do we need to approve to keep going forward with this, or are you just bringing this for us?
Kind of a working draft at this point. I'd ask that you go through this, mark it up, other thoughts that you have, other concerns, as, like I said, if you're kind of thinking even outside of that, of what else you want to see happen. For example, your fishing ordinance right now has that, you can only fish if you're a resident of the town, you can only fish in the ponds that are here. Yes, so far from being, legal. But what I drafted in here was kind of the reverse than how it typically is done, but I believe it's set out, fishing is permitted when there are no signs posted prohibiting. Because the way your current ordinance is written, it requires that a sign is posted prohibiting, so I kind of figured those are probably all around town. And if that's the case, I didn't want to put it the reverse, because typically it's, in this situation of where it's prohibited everywhere, and then there might be that one or two spots that it is permitted, and then that's where the signage is, so it's normally the reverse. But only because that's how the current ordinance is written, and the current ordinance even has a section that says that, I don't remember if it's members of the park or public works or whatever it is, must report back, like the ordinance, many of the ordinances are written more with directions than rules or laws. They are more, that one specifically says that once the signs are installed, they're supposed to report back and give like a record of where these are installed at, or something to that effect. So if there really aren't signs everywhere, then we want to reverse this, to the fact of that it's prohibited unless there's a sign marked where it's permitted. Your current ordinance only allows for catch and release fishing, not allowing for keeping anything. If that's not the case, and they can actually be, taking these home for dinner, then fine, then we change this. That's the kind of stuff that I want you looking at it. Not so much of what is on the books right now, but like I said, what you want to do, how you wanted it imposed. If those things are not issues, what may or may not be, permitted that way. Open burning, fires, grilling is routinely a hot spot for people. However, you have several of your parks that, as an amenity, they have grills in them. So we drafted this as that the grilling is only allowed where there are in fact grills, charcoal only, at those areas. If you're fine with people bringing in their own portable grills, fine. I can draft that differently. It's just, that kind of, if you're not caring if somebody brings in a smoker or, electric, whatever else, Kamados, any of those kinds of things. None of this is set in stone, is my point. It's your body to, kind of work with and incorporate from there of what you want those rules to be.
Tyler, have you looked over your past park rules? Compared them to these, are they far off, or?
Yeah, so I was going to mention, a lot of what you see in here has already been published in the past, just not in the town code. Like, we had rules for golfing, swimming, skateboards, but it would just, be no skateboarding in the parks, and that's it. It doesn't go into detail,
And that's difficult, some rule like that, because you can lawfully have a skateboard on a public roadway. So, or in public parks or public parking lots, things of that nature, unless it's private property, where clearly a parking lot isn't. So some of those just very generic rules, that's why they're, one, until they're codified, they can't be enforced. But secondly, it makes it so difficult to enforce because there gets to be those conflicts. You can't have a skate park and prohibit skateboards in your parks. There has to be those exceptions and those things written in, and that's where the problem comes with kind of just those black and white rules that it causes. If you are asking for your officers, your police officers to enforce, it makes it very difficult when they're supposed to be knowing and drawing the lines and what's allowed and what isn't, if your rule is just a blanket one that in reality is not really going to be applicable.
A lot of this, Johnny, I kind of got this thing rolling, 2 years ago, whatever. Because as a police department, our hands are tied.
Yeah.
We go out there like Wayne was saying about the parks. People are parking on the grass and on the bike paths. There is nothing written. Right. We're writing a 511P, which is so vague. It's a 511 parking ticket.
Right.
That's what we were writing years ago, but there's really nothing there. Like, we go out there and tell people the park's closed. Well, okay, what are you going to do? Well, you got to leave. What are you going to do? We had no enforcement. We couldn't write them a ticket because there was no rule against that. And I remember starting this a couple years ago, I'm like, it was so open, there was really no direction to go. And I remember when we started, it was just like, oh, we're never gonna get to this. And this is
under that
definitely bringing it
example,
now doable.
yeah, you go from a ticket to now they're violating a rule, you get to trespass. Once they've been told to leave and don't, I mean, so that's where it kind of stair steps in, where actually you do have some authorities then. The whole issue of closing your gate, right, at the ball field, things of that nature, that if those things are set out, where then it can start trying to nip some of those problems of people going back and parking and hanging out back behind the baseball fields, those kinds of things that kind of allow for those next steps.
I mean, I think this is great. I mean, from where we were to when it started to where it is now, I mean, it's coming together, definitely.
Well, and I think in that sense too, Mike, you'll have a good perspective on it because of knowing what you were dealing, with from the law enforcement standpoint of, all right, you come up and somebody's, calling because somebody's hanging out in the park doing X, Y, or Z, or what are the problems, or when you're reading it from that perspective, it's as much for, like I said, for your public for compliance as it is for your officers for enforcement, because otherwise, without enforcement, the rules mean nothing. You might as well not even have them.
So I think the approach, at least for this draft, was to keep it pretty general and basic, like I had mentioned, typical issues, typical rules you see in park systems. We came across, I kind of looked at some of our neighboring communities, what they had in their town code, other communities similar of our size, and park systems of our size. And some get really, really extensive. And, this is going to be something that, kind of obviously see how, as we continue to grow, I'm sure there'll be additions at some point, but this is just kind of a starting point.
Right, and I'm gonna piggyback off Mike, but I think, Nicole, and Tyler, you guys have put a lot of effort into this. Would you professionally, I mean, you would just say that as of now, with this kind of makes us kind of current, gets us up to date? I know we can, look at things that we want to maybe tweak a little bit, but basically,
Oh, yeah.
basically, this would make us current.
If it was passed as it was, let's just say you like the rules as they're drafted, yes. What it does is it brings you to adopt the state codes that give you the powers and authorities that are given by state statute once adopted, sets out the ability for this board to make the rules that can be enforced. That's in all of a lot of the legal language on the front end that sets up the park board properly. It also, now this as written has multiple conflicts with your code as it currently is written. That will have to, the council will have to, I'll propose to them at the same time those to be cleaned up so that then there's not those conflicts. But for example, a big one throughout your code is all kinds of restrictions on scooters, motorized, trying to think of the word, the way it's put, that allows for, like, all kinds of things are excluded except for wheelchairs. That's totally in violation of ADA. There's everything that's a motorized scooter, everything that's a personal assisted device. And that's what you'll notice in here. A lot of that I have as exceptions, that motor vehicles, what falls into those. And even though in the motor vehicle definition, I have those specifically excluded, I'm still throwing in here that this is not to restrict anything related to ADA. You can keep your skateboards off from your basketball courts. You can't keep a motorized scooter off from a basketball court because it's ADA compliant, things of that nature.
Right.
So yes, that's the kind of stuff that it's bringing you current on, that
And
gets
with
rid of those
that,
other
then I
violations.
think, Tyler, you come in contact with a lot of feedback from the community. I personally don't have a lot of input that would say, hey, we're looking at something specific, but also we would be capable at a later date, if we wanted to tweak it, or if we have to amend something in here, we could always go back to it, so.
Yeah, what it would involve is, again, a recommendation coming from here to have to go to the council.
Right.
Advertising on the ordinance, the whether they suspend the rules or not, but the two readings on it. Obviously, the advertising, all of those things that, go through that process. So, yes, I mean, it's, routinely a modification or amendment to those ordinances is,
I think that's outstanding. I mean, this is great that we have something that we can really, work with and move forward for the town. And with that, I think,
one thing,
give the board members opportunity, all of us actually, to maybe, get into this a little more in depth. And then maybe come back on the next meeting and then,
I think one thing I'd like to do as well, I had our department head meeting this morning. I'd like to get Chief Flores and the police department's input, to run all this by them, because they're gonna be the enforcers. So, want to make sure, we're all on the same page here. So, and set up a meeting with him here pretty soon, definitely, prior to our next board meeting.
well, as Mike has said, this has been long overdue. And so, hey, at least we're getting up to speed in that regard, so.
I just don't want horses in the park.
well, I'll have you know that under your animal section,
We have to clarify the animal section.
yeah. I mean, here's another one that's it's just like conflict in your code. In one section, your code talks about, I'm gonna mess up the words. We have domestic animals. They have another section that is down as, wild animals being prohibited, although they're not called wild. I apologize, I'm not coming up with it right now. And it says, that included in that is rodents, reptiles, and then other hybrid animals, dogs, whatever. And then about 2 sections later, it talks about having your ferret vaccinated. Ferret's a rodent, right? I mean, like, it's that kind of stuff that's just, there's just one conflict. A little bit later, it talks about how you have to sell your chickens in groups of 12.
Oh, God.
You can't sell chickens in smaller groups than 12, but yet right before that, it prohibits having.
John's definitely changed.
It's just, it's.
It's been a while.
Yes, there's just some odd, funny ordinances. So that's what I'm saying is that, one leads to another, that leads to another. And where I start with this is, all right, you want to do something about animals. I'm going to your code then and looking for what do you have on the books already for animals? And then going from there with it of how much you want. Yeah, what's the deal with not selling, you can only sell chickens in like groups of 12. I don't know what that's all about.
Competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, there's sections about, which is pretty typical. Normally it's like 4 months or less, sometimes 6 months of having animals for sale, so that it's basically the breeders that, home breeders that then have, sell them before they're a certain age, whatever. But then you have, for sections that are missing, there is a large section about breeding of animals in St. John. I mean, and the licensing of the breeders and what they do and how it's set up. I mean, there's more about the breeding than there is about, Sue or Sam walking their dog down the street. I mean, there's nothing on your books about dog off leash, dog bite, anything like that, rabies, those kinds of things of like extensive, but don't sell your chickens in groups of 12 or more or less, less than that. And your
Vaccinate your ferret.
Vaccinate your ferret, that you're not supposed to have. And,
But we're turning the corner.
and what this, like I said, what this is going to do then is then lead to those being cleaned up too. Because otherwise, Mike, back to your question or back to your situation of just because it's in a park that says something is allowed, but another ordinance prohibits it, not only is it that which is not prohibited is permitted, it is the least restrictive means is what you're supposed to apply. So if you prohibit it here and there's a conflict elsewhere that allows it or at least maybe makes it seem like it is, then it's allowed. So those conflicts also cause problems for your officers for enforcement. And we clearly, like I said, the town parks are not in a vacuum. It's not just rules that apply there unless it specifically says in a park. Snowmobiles are prohibited in the town. I wanted to carry that over here, so that's where I put it out as in accordance with the other section, snowmobiles are not allowed in the town elsewhere. For that matter, an officer could cite it under either code, but it just kind of carries some of those bigger ones over. Like I said, it'll help to clear up, as kind of that step process, the ones in the town too. So what you're doing here is going to turn into a much bigger project for Chris, but it's going to clear up, a lot of those other conflicting
He
ordinances too.
welcomes that. He welcomes that.
He does. He does. He's good at that stuff, so.
Tyler's going to welcome the conversation with the police chief also, so we appreciate all that.
It'd be nice to have a meeting with that.
Yes. All right, well, thank you for that. Any other comments, questions? If not, then we'll move to.
If you have questions or comments or something you want to talk about, whatever, in the meantime too, as you're going through any of this, shoot me an email, give me a call, whatever, because I'd rather answer you ahead of time where then, it kind of steers you in a direction of something you want to do in an area than waiting till the next meeting if that's the case.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Nicole.
Absolutely.
Item 6, old business, A, Founder's Park.
So I included an email in your packet that I received today from the Arsh Group. That's the consultant that we've hired to oversee the project. And the email just kind of outlines some concerns that we have with our contractor, as the assurances that they've given that progress would be made have yet to materialize, unfortunately. We've expressed concerns to them on several occasions the past 6 months, and they haven't been too responsive to these concerns. There could be reasons, I think, for some of these delays, whether they're legitimate or not, but I think the frustrating part, at least for me, has been their unresponsiveness. Just as an example, I emailed their principal this past Friday just to ask for a status update in time for this meeting, and I've yet to hear from them. They were also unresponsive last month when I requested an update for the October board meeting. So going back to the letter, our consultant is recommending for us to discuss this issue and kind of review any options we might have to address just the overall lack of progress.
Well, I know I go by there quite often. I haven't seen too much going on. And I think with this letter, I don't know, maybe an option would be to have the Arsh Group and the construction company Integral, maybe at our next board meeting. But it's almost going to be too late then. Or maybe with the legal option, Nicole, could you speak to that?
Yeah, there's provisions in the contract about them not meeting deadlines, about them not complying, about them not being responsive. I'm puzzled by, I'm with Tyler, the amount of park projects that they've done and how highly, they were recommended. Whether or not this is an issue of labor, and not having the workforce, I would think that he would, knowing of the other projects that he has in this community, would be more likely to say to Tyler, hey, listen, here's my problems, here's what's going on, I'm sorry, help me here, whatever. But the lack of response is unacceptable.
What stumps me. He's not even responding.
Absolutely. It'd be one thing even just to come forward with a ton of excuses, but to not even be responsive is the concern. So yes, there are different legal parameters there that I definitely think would be worth reminding them of and what the consequences are with that. I clearly don't think that they would want to be either, as I said, with having other projects in the area, is the black mark on them for something of this size, if they're still looking for other jobs. If it's something that you want, me to get involved in and reaching out to them and or coordinating a meeting if they'll respond at all, with Tyler and myself, can absolutely do that. It's really just what direction you want to take.
I would think we'd have to wait till December before legal action be taken.
Not
against them,
necessarily,
right? I
because they're
mean,
not meeting they're not meeting the benchmarks.
Well,
I definitely think we need to take up to the next level.
I'll tell you, Integral.
If they haven't
I've never been
responded in
happy
2
with them.
months.
They haven't done anything.
What's this right here for the last 6 months?
Let it be a lesson to us.
I'm saying the
Don't
last-
always go for the lowest bidder.
I
I mean,
was preaching that a while back.
yeah, I mean, it's true.
Well, it may be come back to bite us, but personally, I think maybe getting something before December because
Well, yeah, if
the
you said there's
deadline.
benchmarks in there, Nicole, then yes, of course.
What's your thoughts, Tyler? I mean, you've been interacting, you've talked to both parties. Do you think it would be beneficial to bring them both together? But at that point, I think we've missed the window of getting the,
So we
completion.
had them together, we had a meeting at the park office on October 29th. That was a Friday, I believe, to discuss, the process moving forward. And at that meeting, we were kind of given additional assurances that it would be a productive couple weeks. That they even mentioned yesterday or today for site concrete. That's part of my email last Friday to them. Okay, is this going to happen this week? We got a board meeting Tuesday. Give us an update. There hasn't been progress out there yesterday or today, and I didn't receive an update. It's just stuff like that. It's frustrating. So I want to give you gentlemen,
I say that we go with Nicole and Miss Nicole and get some answers.
Mr. President, on your last meeting, I believe they gave you a date of 11/24 this year that it should be complete.
I remember
And they haven't done anything. I think when I reported back to the town council, the concrete work was supposed to start right away the next week after we had our council meeting, and there's been nothing out there. They delivered some playground equipment, but Tyler said no, deliver it to the Parks Department where Public Works is. And if not, that would have been just thrown out in the field and probably been out there all winter. So Tyler's got that in the garage. But, yeah, they're not moving too fast. A snail could work faster than them.
well, I guess I've been trying to
Thank
figure out
you,
how to approach some of this the past few months, but every time we kind of express concerns, we're given assurances. It's going to be a productive September. Like, okay, if they get moving along, it's not like it's a massive project, You get this thing moving, you'll see a lot of progress being made, and that would probably, ease some of our concerns. But September goes and nothing. October goes, nothing.
Obviously not a priority to them,
Yeah,
so.
or maybe there's some impediments, maybe there's obstacles that they're not maybe wanting to talk, but we need to know.
Yeah, my biggest thing is they're not even answering you whatsoever.
We
And
need
if they
to know.
told you, hey, we can't do it till next March, at least you would know something. But not answering you is just leaving you in the dark. So, I mean, we definitely have to take it to the next step, in my opinion.
What would be necessary to have a consideration for the attorney to,
You don't even need a vote.
no,
Yeah, just it would, because I'm not actually taking, official action at this point, but just to further inquire into this and to try and get some more answers and turn up the heat, I guess, a little bit in that sense. But there's not legal action, or I'm sorry, there's not action that's required by the board.
okay.
Just based on the discussion, then, Tyler and I will talk about this more, and I will reach out to them.
All right, I think that's the best route to go.
Definitely.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you, Tyler. I think we know where we're at with that situation. Moving on to item 7, reports and correspondence. A, staff.
So I have 2 items. I just want to report that our Boo Bash event was Saturday, October 23rd at Prairie West Park. I just want to thank, we had good involvement from the various town employees, the clerk treasurer's office, Chris and Jen from the town manager's office were out there. Police department was in attendance. I think Wayne probably set the record for popcorn made over a 2-hour time span.
Yeah, we made some pop.
Yeah. But no, the weather cooperated. It was a good turnout, so I appreciate all their support. Also, we had a community serve day with, in kind of partnership with Suncrest Church on Saturday, October 30th. We had, I think, around 70 volunteers spread out over 3 park sites. We targeted projects at Civic Park, Prairie West Park, and the community gardens. So a lot was accomplished that morning, so we appreciate their help as well.
That's excellent, thank you. B, board members?
I don't want to go into a long discussion, but Tyler, adaptive swings. Did we get any further with that?
So I actually attended a conference in Muncie, Indiana Parks Conference, a few weeks ago. And I kind of went around to a few vendors to see playground vendors to discuss that as an option. And yes, I did. One of them does have, I guess, an upgraded version. I guess I had some concerns about one of the platform style that we talked about last month.
Right.
But I guess that's been upgraded a bit to make it safer. So that's something I can get more details for that. But
Okay, cool.
yeah,
That had been a cool conference, huh?
yeah,
I mean, really, it had to have been a lot of higher tech stuff.
yeah. It's kind of nice. Good time of the year to do it. You kind of recharge, get ready for the new year. Muncie's not exactly a thriving nightlife,
So you said it.
Not that we're focused on that, but
Right. Okay, well, thank you, yeah, that's cool. That's all I have.
Anybody?
Are we done out the ball fields, like the dumpster and everything?
yeah.
I
So
know they make a last pickup or whatever.
yeah. I believe I let the Public Works know. They kind of coordinate the dumpster removals. I believe those have been picked
They usually
up.
leave the dumpsters, but I just want to make sure we shut that gate. 'Cause
Oh, okay.
We'll start getting like refrigerators and couches back there every year. Last year the gate, we did. I mean, there was nothing in the dumpsters. First time ever.
Sprinklers are off, right?
Yes, they are.
And the lights?
I don't know.
No more water in?
I wouldn't put it past them.
That's all I have.
Anything, Patrick?
Nothing.
I'd just like to comment that I know we've been exploring some options and kind of looking into the community center for the town of St. John, and just want to make sure if we can maybe get that on the agenda for our next meeting to kind of see where we're at, pin down exactly maybe the direction we need to go. I feel like the window could be closing on what might be available to us, so I think there's a little urgency there, so if we can definitely get that on the agenda.
Wayne, is there an update on the 40 acres?
It's still pending. It's a question mark. So what Mike is saying, that there is an opportunity for Suncrest. There's been appraisals. Some of you guys have toured that building. I have. That's a possibility, that it's already built. You have to improve the inside a little bit or change something around. I think there's about 350, 380 parking spaces. There's green space around it that you could use for pickleball, for some other things. It's something that's out there that we could explore. And if the town council wants to have some of their members go out there and look at it, that's fine. But if we lose the 40 acres, we still have Suncrest.
Yeah, I'm not, we definitely need to get that pinned down before.
Has there been any other discussion about what those 40 acres would be used for? Like, are there other?
Well, the first thing is you want to obtain it. And then once you get it, then you can decide what you want to do with it. Whether it's a dome for football or more fields for baseball, maybe a soccer field. But once you get the property, then you can decide how you want to develop it for different things. And then if you got that and you didn't have Suncrest, then you could build your own building. But the cost on that's going to be a whole lot more. I think a building would probably cost you maybe $15 million. That might be, for that same size that Suncrest has.
Isn't that the figure we came up with, though, with the purchase and upgrade of Suncrest would be right around 15.
Yeah,
too,
but there's
so-
Suncrest would work with you, and, you know, they would stay there while their church is getting built, their new church, and then they would help maybe make the payments on that, on the payment for that, the church. But, they like rent from us, but it probably needs some more discussion. But they asked me when they had this, Saturday in October, and kind of, you know, I said, well, we're interested, but, we're not going anywhere with it yet.
Well, as you can see, there's an urgency, and I mean, we really need to kind of like pin down the direction.
One more question, Wayne. What is the holdup on the yay or nay of the 40 acres? What are we waiting on?
We have another meeting coming up, I think, in what is it, next week?
Possibly.
Right, so, and then we'll find out a little bit more.
So that might help our decision as well after that
Been
meeting.
over 2 months.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying.
No, I'm just saying, we,
No, I'm with
2
you.
months, for 2 months, they've been saying, we're gonna hear something in a couple days. We're gonna hear something in a couple
Right.
days.
You gotta remember it's tied
That's-
to litigation.
so,
Pardon?
So you have to remember it's tied to litigation. Nothing moves quickly.
Yeah, it's a slow process.
yep. All right. Appreciate that, Johnny.
Yeah.
Town council liaison?
That's what
Mr.
I was
Wayne
gonna
Pondinas, is that any
discuss,
other?
and you discussed it.
Sorry,
We
Wayne.
just went through some of what Johnny asked me, so basically, that's it in a nutshell.
All right. Well, thank you, Johnny. With that, we'll go to item 8, payment of the bills. Consider payment of the bills in the amount of $19,141.24.
I'll make a motion to pay the bills of $19,141.24.
I'll second it.
It's a motion by John Boersma, second by Mike Moffett. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 9, public comment. Any public comment for the park board? If not, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.